Have you ever said something in the middle of an argument and immediately thought, why did I say that? Why did I do that? If you have, you are certainly not alone. Welcome there. My name is Ashley. I'm a mental health expert and I help Christians overcome anxiety using Christ centered neuroscience without the typical just pray more advice. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can receive notifications when I drop new content. What I described at the beginning of the video is an experience we all have. You may hear it referred to as the amygdala hijack, but for this video, we are referring to it as emotional hijacking. I am going to expand more on this concept, but more importantly, I want to talk about the connection between emotional hijacking and anxiety. All of my life, I've struggled with my mind going blank during anxiety or saying, thinking, doing too much in those moments that made the anxiety worse. And that's exactly why I want to walk you through a major shift that can completely change how you experience those emotionally hijacked moments. So let's dive in. Emotional hijacking is an experience where your thinking brain is literally compromised and arriving too late to support and help you in situations. It is just literally offline. The emotional center has taken over. In these moments, we have very little control over ourselves. The best way I can explain emotional hijacking is to give you an analogy. Think of yourself as a personal vehicle. But most of the time, your thinking brain is your primary driver. This is decision making, logical thinking, rational thinking, problem solving. When you're emotionally hijacked, your emotions get so high and flooded. The emotional center knocks the thinking brain out of the driver's seat, grabs the wheel, pushes the gas, and goes on a joyride. We do not want the emotional center of our brain driving because it does not have the capacities and the abilities as the thinking brain. Now, the thing about the emotional center is it is not caring about following the rules. It's immature. It is not caring about if you hit or damage any other vehicles. It is not paying attention. It is ignoring signs and hazards. It is making risky choices. And in this joyride, you are uncontrollable. The thinking brain is trying to get back in the driver's seat to regain control again. The other parts of the brain are also trying to support and help the thinking brain get in that driver's seat because that's ultimately what is needed. But that emotional center holds on to the wheel so tightly. If we go back and look at the diagram of the anxiety feedback loop, I'm going to zoom in the section that shows you exactly where the emotional hijacking occurs. The emotional hijacking occurs where there is this surge of fear and emotions. When your anxiety shows up and that emotional hijacking occurs, you don't have access to what you've learned about anxiety. This concept becomes very helpful and vital when clients encounter setbacks. They feel guilty and they feel bad about the fact that they did not have enough self-control to do what we had talked about. This concept was very important to me once I learned it because it explained so much of the difficulties that my clients were having with actually implementing and seeing the progress in their experiences. Basically, all that information that tells you this is not a good idea. This has consequences. This could lead to something really bad. You do not have access to it. So once I learned this key idea, then I could better support them when they were having their difficulties and they were not meeting their goals. Because I knew they were probably emotionally hijacked and that's why they couldn't do it, it allowed them to be able to give themselves the grace in order to say, hey, I was too emotionally heightened. So no, I could not practice it. And then to reiterate to them to try it in times where you're not as emotionally hijacked. It allowed them to keep going despite their setbacks. If somebody is actively experiencing anxiety or you are actively experiencing anxiety, you may very much realize after the fact, I had no reason to be scared. It wasn't as bad as I thought. But when you're emotionally hijacked, you don't want to hear any of that. You don't want to hear somebody say, oh, well, just calm down. Just do a couple of deep breaths. It'll be okay. It may be logical, maybe rational, but it doesn't resonate with you because remember, your thinking brain is offline. After the fact, you might reflect and you might say, you know what, they were right. When you are anxious, you can tell people, like, that's not helping. I need 5 minutes alone. Give yourself what you need so that your thinking brain can get back online. This is why we can know things intellectually, we can know them mentally, but when we get in the moment, we're not able to actually execute them or put them into practice. And so we have to sometimes think about, if I'm not able to implement the new stuff, is it because I am emotionally hijacked? Because if you are, you literally do not have the control over yourself in order to do the intentional things that you are learning. You will regain access once you are calmed down. But as long as you're emotionally hijacked, you do not have access to that information. This is why it is important for us to not be emotionally hijacked long term. In addition, you don't want it to be so frequent that you are then just on a constant emotional roller coaster. You can be emotionally hijacked with any emotion. You can become so overly excited about something that you do not look at the parts of the thinking brain normally would. If a deal sounds too good to be true, then it usually is. We can get ourselves in situations that aren't good for us. So you react, and then afterwards, when you calm down, we start to reflect on our experiences. Emotional hijacking is the very reason that 3 seconds can change someone's life. So we have to be really careful with this. You want emotional hijacking to be moments because you cannot avoid it. The goal is not to get rid of emotional hijacking. The goal is to become aware of it so that you can calm down the emotional hijacking. Once you can recognize it and give yourself that ability to calm down from it, now you have regained access to your thinking brain more quickly, efficiently, and effectively. And that's what we want. To go back to my analogy, the longer the joyride, the more potential for damage. We want that thinking brain to be able to get the wheel as soon as it possibly can. The good news is emotional hijacking isn't the end of control. It's just the moment we forget that we have it. So now let's get into how you can do that. Creating self-awareness. It's very hard to work on something if you don't even know what you're working on. It's so important to determine when you are getting emotionally overwhelmed. What's that point? I no longer have control over myself because of my emotions. Having that self-awareness and really getting to the heart of it are very powerful, because once you can start to identify that, you can start to move intentionally. The buffer is something to calm down your bodily system. Then your thinking brain can actually get back in the driver's seat and say, okay, what do I need in this moment? Some strategies require more of the thinking brain, like journaling. If you're emotion hijacked, journaling is not going to be the first thing that you're going to do. You have to do something in between that is body connected. The most powerful and smallest things that you can do for emotional hijacking is to practice pausing. Allow yourself to have still moments. A couple of seconds or a minute can make a difference between responding in a way that is emotional hijacked and out of control and reacting in a way you feel really good about. Pausing gives us ability to really think about what we want to do. I've seen it where emotional hijacking has been resolved within a minute or under a minute by just pausing. Pauses are very pivotal, especially if you do multiple of them in the day. It will give your body that experience of what it's like to be still. So then it creates that self-awareness when you're getting emotionally hijacked, where you know, oh no, I'm getting to that point. Let me change something here. Slowing down feels very counterintuitive for most of us because we are taught to move fast in life. But when you slow down in your day, it actually helps you to be less emotionally hijacked because you are adapting a slower approach to everything. You don't necessarily feel the need to respond right away, or you become okay with things being slower than you would like. It just shifts the attitude that we have. Gratitude. When you have a mind and attitude of gratitude, you will be less emotionally hijacked because you will be feeling and being thankful for the good that is always there. As much bad there might be in your life, there's something good. So each day, even if you just say, what is the one good thing that I can be grateful for? Just one thing. If you know you are getting emotionally heightened, you can take action proactively before you get there. It is a lot harder to get out of emotional hijacking once it's happening. It's just easier if the thinking brain can stay in the driver's seat in the first place. It's going to be more work if you got to now get the emotional center off that wheel because it's going to hold on. Save the hard work for the moments where you weren't able to do something beforehand. You want to try to do as much of that proactivity as you possibly can. If we don't have to put ourselves in those positions, then let's not. This is an area that the Bible specifically talks about quite a bit. And so I just want to read a few verses that back up what we're saying with this emotional hijacking. James 1:19-20 says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Proverbs 14:29, whoever is patient has great understanding, but one who is quick-tempered displays folly. If somebody is quick tempered, they are more prone to emotional hijacking very quickly and tend to be emotionally hijacked more than the average person. Proverbs 16:32. Better is a patient person than a warrior that can conquer a city, because a patient person has self-control. You do have to take the time and say, what do I need in order to keep myself from getting this angry? Proverbs 19:11. A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. Do things that will help you so every little thing does not send you off the edge. Patience is very much connected to emotional hijacking. It's like if you're waiting in a line. You're going to have some people that are going to be emotionally hijacked, and they are going to be like, why is this line so long? And they're going to want to argue. We all have seen it. And then you have everyone else that is practicing patience and says, hey, I could be emotionally hijacked by this. I could let myself get very upset and angry about this, but I am not going to do that. I know that the line is going to move and that eventually it will be my turn. So that's just an example of patience versus emotional hijacking. And last one, Ecclesiastes 7:9. Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. All of these verses point us to do intentional work in these areas because of what can happen when we encounter emotional hijacking. Just because we know that it exists and it's going to happen does not mean that we should just be so lax with it. It's not an excuse for the behaviors, the comments, or whatever it is that happens in that interaction. We still got to come back with the ability to repair, apologize, and to own up and have accountability for our actions in those emotional hijack states. We all have to do our due diligence to support ourselves so that we are not being in emotional hijacking frequently for long periods of time. When you really work at your emotional hijacking, really allows you to produce that fruit of the spirit, self-control. There's so much power in that. You can do all of that great examination, self-awareness, self-processing, and self-reflection once you actually get that emotional hijacking under control. You will be less controlled by your emotions if you do this work. The more we learn about this, the more it allows us to help ourselves. Thank you all for tuning in today. If you're serious about improving your anxiety and decreasing emotional hijacking, and you would also like direct one-on-one support from me, I'm actually opening a few discounted coaching spots inside my exclusive program, the Unmask, Heal, and Rise Premium Coaching Program. This is a limited early access opportunity before the public launch of it. And so this specific round includes the highest level of access at the lowest investment. If you'd like to explore this, book a free chat with me below. I'm going to have the link in the description. I would love to meet and talk with you about healing your anxiety over the next few months. And we are going to be doing plenty of work on this emotional hijacking so that you are seeing the fruitfulness within your self-control. In the meantime, my heart and love goes out to you all. Take good care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video.